All right, everybody. Hello and welcome back. Hopefully, you're all doing well wherever you are. Spring or summer, summer's finally upon us. Uh, I got my home gym set up, going up in my garage, and it is very, very hot out there. But I'm very, very excited. And this time of year, I just am generally happier. As I talk about all the time, I'm like an aspiring Florida man because there's no snow shovels down there in Pennsylvania. Unfortunately, there is, but anyways, I want to apologize to the channel members because I've not been able to get a Comic Cons footage up from this past weekend. My computer is not quite well enough equipped to put together a 4K 60 frames per second hour-long video, so I'll get that out to you guys eventually. But I appreciate everybody still hanging in there. Today's topic is going to be money in politics, where it goes, foreign lobbying. I'm sure we'll get into some, domestic policy, foreign policy stuff because I had her co-host on of the previously prohibited podcast, which I am a huge fan of. I've binged so many episodes today and then like a couple weeks ago when I had Janine on. But I found out she's also a fellow Ron Paul supporter, so I'm sure we'll touch on that a little bit as well. Make sure you hit all the links below where you can find my guest, everything she's got going on, their podcast, Tucker Fitness through the link below. Use code Kyle at checkout. Like I said a couple weeks ago, somebody got like the same exact order that I did: creatine pills, some merch, HCL, and I think some pre-workout or something like that. But yeah, code Kyle checkout to let them know I sent you, and it obviously supports me and supports the brand, supports you. Fox and Sons, deemed fit, all that stuff. And without further ado, let's rock and roll. And welcome to the show, Miss Melissa. Melissa, how are you doing?
Good. How are you?
Excellent. Well, like I said, I found out that you were a Ron Paul supporter. Whenever I saw you come across Twitter, I always just assumed you were kind of on the left because, like, most people on the left are typically good on the issue of Israel, and most people on the right are typically bad, regrettably. Although it seems to be changing. But then I was listening to your episode. I want to say it was yesterday. I can't remember who exactly it was with. It was some woman who has a decent sized following on TikTok. But anyways, you had mentioned that you were a Ron Paul supporter, so. I hopefully I didn't spoil too much of your introduction, but go ahead. Let my audience know who you are and what you do.
No, that's fine. In 2012, I was hardcore Ron Paul supporter, but I'm actually a registered Republican, which is pretty rare to be as anti-Israel as I am, and then also be a registered Republican.
Yeah.
And I am sorry because, of course, my dogs have decided to. Just one
Grace
second.
us with our presence.
Let me. I have to yell. Just a second.
Okay, yeah, that's fine. I know exactly how it goes. If anybody's been watching long enough, I'm sure you've probably seen one of my two, formerly three, they used to be up here.
Sorry about that, guys. So yeah, okay. So it's like every time they're totally fine. They're not even in the room, and then they just bust in, and then they decide they have to have like WrestleMania right behind me. And so the listeners of our podcast know about that. We get lots of complaints. Anyways, so I'm registered Republican who's like kind of anti-Israel, which is really super rare for Republicans in general. And yeah, but I did support Ron Paul. I, of course, 3-time Trump voter, voted reluctantly for even Tom Tillis, Ted Budd. I mean, there's really not too many Republicans that I, have the chance to vote for that I haven't voted for. Although this past election, I did actually abstain from my house because I voted for Trump because he promised to be anti-war, but all of the war pigs in the Republican Congress, I couldn't vote for any of them, so I just left it blank. But yeah, that's kind of my story. Like I said, registered Republican, and I volunteer with the county GOP. I actually didn't volunteer this past time. 2024 was kind of a bitter election for me because I was so disappointed with the way the Republican Party was being handled. But yeah, prior to that, I always have. So yeah, I try to push for more conservative candidates on school boards, local politics, things like that. I live in a blue county, but it's right next to Fort Bragg. So it's like this kind of weird thing where like our Democrats aren't like lunatics. Because you still have to be a little bit, you have to be kind of geared towards the military, and there is just a
Right.
little bit more conservative, uh, I don't know, feeling.
Conservative ethos, yeah.
Yeah. I was thinking ethos, but yeah, that's how it is. So yeah.
Yeah, I kinda understand how that goes because I'm in Southwestern Pennsylvania, so pretty close to Pittsburgh, which is all steel
Mhm.
mills, so it's kinda like
Mhm.
there's a lot of what they would call, blue dog Democrats, where it's basically
Right.
all, like, former union people who could
Mhm.
be convinced to vote for Trump pretty
Right.
easily, especially with the way the Democrats have been over the last 20 years, and, it's a Pittsburgh's a very blue city, but though you
Yeah.
kinda go outside of there and it's all red. I mean, especially where I live,
Right.
I tell people all the time, I walk my dogs around 5 o'clock every single morning, and there's Trump signs still up everywhere from 2020. And then
Mhm.
there was a gas station. Where the hell was I going? Anyways, up towards Butler. Oh yeah, that's right. My band was playing a show up in Butler this past weekend, and I can't remember the exact area, but they have a gas station up there called America Gas, and there's this, an American flag in every single cinder block and block all around the gas
Mhm.
station, and um, it was on Easter, or no, that would have been the day before Easter, and there was a digital billboard that had Trump on it and said "Happy Easter, America." No, I
Okay.
never
Yeah.
voted for Trump,
Yeah.
but,
Okay.
there is something about that I'm still kinda like, "Hell yeah, man. That's cool."
Yeah. Yeah. Oh yeah, the Americana feeling and whatnot,
Yeah.
pride in your country and whatnot. I do think that those people are genuinely good people, even though sometimes I think maybe the politics are misguided. And not even necessarily that they're misguided because they do believe that they're in what they're voting for, and it is presented to them in such a way that yeah, they should vote. It's just that unfortunately, most of our politicians are full of shit and they're liars and they're super
Mm.
corrupt, and they'll tell you whatever they need to be to get elected, and then just serve their own interest or those of their donors. So
Yeah. So it seemed like there were quite a few camps that kinda went into voting for Trump this time around, and, this was probably the first election that I could vote in that I just chose to sit out
okay,
because, it despite all the promises that Trump made, it seemed to me like he was mostly full of shit, and it kinda seems like he
hmm
still kinda is.
yeah,
But, his first month, I was talking about this on my other podcast Monday night, where, it seemed like the first month there was a lot of really good momentum. Like, I was almost to the point where I'm like, should I have went out and voted for Trump?" But then
hmm
it seemed like after that, oh, well, we're cutting $1 trillion out of the government to now we're hoping for like 50 billion, but we're also making up all that, cutting in the Pentagon
hmm
budget. And oh, well, we're going to deport people. And this was something that I kind of had in the back of my mind the entire time because Trump endorsed it before and a lot of Republicans did. And I didn't really realize it until probably about almost a year ago now. Like the whole anti BDS legislation and anti
hmm
Israel speech laws that were on the books. I'm like, I could see this making a big comeback this time around. And I was surprised to be as
yeah,
vindicated as I was, unfortunately. So,
yeah.
and I know it's a little bit of a ramble, but what was kind of your perspective going into this election?
So I was. It's funny. So after COVID, I actually went through a phase where I like really, really hated Trump, like super hardcore. And I was, I'm always embarrassed to say this. I was like a big time DeSantis fangirl, like
Mm,
super cringe, like crazy cringe, right? And I was a really annoying online kind of troll for him. And then I actually got suspended from Twitter. I caught a perma ban in July of 2023, and it was ended up just being 30 days. But in that time, I ended up really kind of digging into FEC finances, campaign records, and this is
mm,
that was when the second quarter of 2023 had been reported. I ended up when I came back, I wrote like a viral thread on Tim
mm,
Scott, but I that was like the first time when I really looked at DeSantis's finances. Well, I found things that I didn't like that I thought were like he's associating with people, he's hiring consultants that I don't think he should be hiring because these
yeah,
same consultants work for these really shady other politicians. So why I'm kind of the opinion that if you lay down with dogs, you're going to have fleas. And
Mm.
so if you're associating with him, when you've got certain people like being your treasurer or running your campaign, that's like a big red flag. So I did actually back off of him a lot. That was in like August 2023. And then of course, going forward to, flash forward to October 7th happens. And I already had issues because we saw in like September, I think he did some kind of, it was for the moms, like the Open the Schools moms. I forget what it was. It was actually in Pennsylvania where this thing
Mm.
happened, and it was this huge rally that he ended up just giving this bizarre speech where he was just talking about how much he loved Israel and how he was always going to stand with Israel and he would always
Yeah.
be there for them. And I tweeted out about it and I said, this is really bizarre. Why is he doing this? I don't like this because this is supposed to be like my America First candidate. This is going to be like, he's going to be everything that I wanted Trump to be, right?
Right.
And like super hardcore nationalist, crazy, right? And then, of course, October 7th happens, and then he was just so atrocious.
Yeah, real quick.
Like
Do you I'm surprised you don't recall back in 2020, he was flying over to Tel Aviv to sign legislation.
Right, right.
Yeah.
So that came up, and I defended it too because
Mhm.
I thought that it was symbolic, right?
Sure.
I didn't necessarily defend it. I actually think I actually did put out some tweets on it, and
Yeah.
that was actually the first time that I saw like how cultish his fan base was. It was actually just as it's cultish
Right.
as every other one,
Yeah.
but I didn't actually freak out about it. I remember Laura Loomer, oddly enough, was like the one that went after him for it. So I was defending him against her, and it was weird. But I
Mhm.
genuinely, naively thought that this is just symbolic. I do think it's a little weird that he's signing international trade treaties in foreign countries as this
Right.
state senator, but whatever, he's running for office, he will, he's running for the presidency, he will actually have and actually, I believe that was in 2023 when he signed that.
Okay.
But because it was right, I want to say it was right before he officially announced. It was like April.
Mm.
Anyways, and I am a little bit sympathetic about some of the more obnoxious tactics that people take to protest Israel. I don't actually understand why we need to litter 15,000, flyers on people's lawns, make a big mess. I don't think that those things are
Yeah.
effective. I don't
Well,
think that they should be banned or outlawed. I don't think you should be arrested for them either.
just
But,
don't be an asshole about it.
right. It was kind of like
Yeah.
a whatever. But yeah, so we flash forward to October, and he just, I mean, is so, in my opinion, just so inappropriate. The things that he was doing, using taxpayer money to fly, weapons, privately bought weapons to Israel. I thought that was really inappropriate. Like, what do you mean this is actually the federal government's job to supply them with weapons. It's not the job of a state governor. I again, we had there were actually Americans in Gaza and in the West Bank, and they were not offered any kind of reprieve, any kind of chance to get out of Israel when all of this was happening. It was just the people who were there in Israel. I thought that was really inappropriate. And
Mhm.
then when it was like became down, it was like him, DeSantis, Vivek, and what's her name,
Nikki
Haley.
Haley. Yeah.
Yes, well, not necessarily Vivek as much as Nikki Haley, and then of course Tim Scott, all of them, and it was like a competition to who could declare their love and loyalty and undying servitude to Israel more. It was so gross. And
Yeah.
then at the same time, Trump is like just not saying anything. And actually, Trump's first instinct on it was to say, what the hell happened? That doesn't sound
Mhm.
right. I mean, he knew, and he said somebody ought to put Bibi on trial, or he should be impeached or something. I forget what he said, but he blamed Bibi for it like right away. And then he just stayed quiet, right? And I was like, okay, well, damn, I guess I was really wrong, and everybody else was right. DeSantis really is the deep state stooge that they said he was. And so yeah, so going into this, I actually appreciated how Trump was very quiet and reserved. And then of course we saw that kind of flip in March with Miriam Adelson's the first time he met with her. Again, I was sympathetic to him because of the he got convicted in that state charge up in New York. He had, I think, something like $400 million put of his own money put on frozen by the courts, and he needed money, right? So we saw he had the meeting with Miriam, and then the rhetoric changed really around April. He started getting really when it was pretty clear he had locked it up. He started getting very or more so, I should say, ass kissy, and I didn't like it. I was very critical of it going forward. Then Butler happens, yada, yada, yada. I was still, but at that point, like, it was just so egregious what Biden had been doing. You know,
Right.
Biden and Harris had been doing in Israel. What they had at that point, you know, we had seen the bombing of Rafah. I had seen so many horrific pictures. You know, some of the images are just seared into my memory that I was so disgusted with what these people had, you know, attached, had enabled, and then also had drug America into and really tied us together with what I think are just the worst crimes against humanity that have been committed since World War II. And now, you know, we're deeply associated with this. It's a dark stain on our country. And I felt somebody had to be punished. Like,
Yeah.
we could not reelect that woman. You know, we
Mhm.
couldn't. The Democrats, they had to be punished, and I still stand by that.
Yeah.
Obviously, Trump has been extremely disappointing, extremely, and I don't ever hold that back. But I don't regret voting for him because I could never in a million years have voted for her.
Right.
Certainly, no. And yeah, I mean, you know, people say, well, you could have voted third party, and I'm like, okay, you know, I don't know.
Mhm.
Because if I'd voted third party and then she won, I would have been so mad at myself.
Yeah, I kind of mulled this over quite a bit, and
Yeah.
usually my conclusion came down to, well, I'm not voting because Trump, to me, I just know he's going to be all in for Israel, and then he's going to stock his cabinet with China hawks. And to me, that's one of the biggest issues, is preventing any further war. And the big goal
Mhm.
always is to fight a war with China. And it's just I couldn't sign on board with that. But the way that I looked at it, especially when people brought up like third party, or you could vote libertarian, I'm like, okay, well, the libertarian candidate was a
He
gay
was
man.
awful.
Yeah, he was a gay
So
man
awful.
who was, calling for open borders. And really, it's kind of funny because like him and Trump on like the cultural issues were identical. They're pretty much both relatively pro-choice, although like the people underneath Trump and kind of more,
Mhm.
the more executive people underneath Trump are more pro-life, which is
Mhm.
good. Um, when it came to the vaccine stuff, they were both very, very pro-vaccine, but they were both against
Yeah.
mandates. Just like they were the same on a lot of issues. But the only difference here was is that Trump actually went and actively campaigned to try and get Ron Paul libertarians into his voting coalition.
Mhm.
Now, granted, he didn't do shit for them. He at least pandered to them, while Chase Oliver wasn't doing any of that. So it's like, okay,
Yeah.
well, if you're going to vote, Trump can win. Trump is
Mhm.
making promises to libertarians. Granted, I didn't think he was going to come through on any of them. Thank God he at least came through on Russ Ulbricht. But like,
Mhm.
you know, he's at least reaching an olive branch out in campaign rhetoric. So, are you
Right.
going to vote for the dude who can't win and won't give you anything
Yeah.
and actively kind of doesn't like your camp? Or are you going to go for the guy who can win and is at least pandering to you? Like, to
Right.
me, the choice
Yeah.
is pretty clear if you're inclined to vote.
Right. Yeah. I never understood people who abstained from voting
Mhm.
until, honestly, until this election.
Mhm.
Um, and then I just kind of got it. And I actually didn't even, I don't blame anybody for, but I just feel like all of the
Yeah.
choices were such shit, right? All
Yeah.
of them. Um, everything about this election just sucked, and everything about our election system in general sucks, and it is
Mhm.
corrupt. And I know that's, everybody says that. I get it. I feel like, because I do have a really strong grasp on how corrupted our campaign finance has become,
Mhm.
that people, the system is so broken, it's so unbelievably broken, that it cannot be fixed by swapping out candidates, because
Mhm.
it's not actually a candidate issue. That if the system weren't so rotten, we actually wouldn't have all of these shitty people, right? But the system is so broken that the only people that can actually win, technically, are total shitbags. Sorry, I know I've cursed 3 times
No, no,
in
you're
a small
fine.
period.
Yeah.
Um, Yeah, that it is so corrupted by money, by plutocrats. Really, I mean, it's a very small group of people who run it all, and to a certain extent, it is the American public's fault, right? Because we allow ourselves to be so easily manipulated by commercial campaigns and by advertising dollars. We don't participate in primaries, and we don't hold our party elect. People are significantly more concerned with, like, what Nancy Pelosi is doing. They live in Arkansas, but they could not care less with their own, uh, or they don't want to hold their own representatives' feet to the fire, and instead they just bitch and complain all day long about Nancy Pelosi or Chuck Schumer or Democrats that they actually have no control over whatsoever, and
Mhm.
so and vice versa. I mean, Democrats do the exact same thing, talking about Jim Jordan or I don't know, Steve Scalise or whoever their boogeyman is. I don't ever
Mhm.
know, but
Yeah. So you had mentioned campaign financing, and you have a whole
mhm,
thread pinned at the top of your Twitter about this. And I think this is something that
yeah,
like a lot of people talk about, but no one really dives into the details.
yeah,
So of course the latest claim is that Cutter. Cutter is funding
yeah.
everybody. They fund millions, I've heard billions
Oh yeah,
into our
yeah.
elections. It's Cutter. It's not another country that is the only country in the world that is exempt from being registered under the Foreign Agents Registry Act. It's Qatar. So let's start with kind of like campaign financing and
Mhm.
where you think it's kind of most rotten, or kind of take the reins and go from where you think is best to kind of start from.
Okay, yeah, and I working on this thread now. I feel like every time I feel like the FCC is always tracking me, and they always know when I've got something really good because their website will shut down for me.
Yeah.
I swear, it like slows down to nothing. Like
Mhm.
I was on it all morning, and then I was like finally like honing in on what I was wanting to get,
Mhm.
and figuring it out, and then all of a sudden the speed goes, I mean, just goes down to a crawl, just a trickle. I'm
Mhm.
getting error codes left and right. But regardless,
Awful.
so yeah, so if you go to my Twitter page, you go to my highlights, that's where all of my campaign finance stuff is at. So the one that is up right now, that is pinned right now, is about foreign lobbying. And yeah, like you said, what we hear all the time is that it's Qatar. Look at all of the billions that Qatar is pouring into our election. And let me see, let me see if I can pull that up really quick.
Mhm.
And I'll show you guys for anybody who doesn't know what we are talking about. Um, let's see. Um,
Our buddy Tyler in the chat had mentioned Pam Bondi. Okay, you got the screen pulled up. Pam Bondi
mhm.
was a registered foreign agent for Qatar, which is pretty
Yes.
funny.
Mhm.
But anyways, here you go. All right.
Okay. So here we go. So it's just kind of an intro about what we always see, and this is what you'll see all the time right here. Here's one from your girl Insurrection Barbie, and she says, once again, here are the top 10 foreign countries lobbying in America, and she says that these are the ones. Um, Obviously, she says in lobbying, this was, I forget what year it was. It's 2016 to 2024. Of course, the big one is Qatar. All of these people, look, Israel only spent 188 million. China's spending all of this, right? So, and they
Well,
get
look,
these.
let's real quick read through those. I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm
Um,
sorry.
no,
Yeah.
no, no, it's okay. Yeah, China is number one, and this is always so funny to me because people point this out, but it's like, okay, well, you think if China spent all this money lobbying that like we wouldn't be sailing warships through the Taiwan Strait, we wouldn't be literally
Yeah.
militarily encircling them, and Pete Hegseth wouldn't say we're trying to build up Taiwan's defense in case of because we want to have a war with China. So it's
Mm-hmm.
always so funny when people bring that up. But yeah, China over 440 is that yeah, 440 million
Million.
dollars.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, yeah. I'm very, very
Yep.
bad at math. And then Japan would be
Yep.
number 2, Liberia in third at 350 million, South Korea at 303 million, the Marshall Islands at 280 million. There's one underneath there that we're
Saudi
blanking.
Arabia,
Okay.
271 million.
Yeah.
And then, Qatar 250 million, the Bahamas 239 million, the UAE 225, and then Israel at 188.
That's how the Bahamas gets
Okay.
all these nice, Carnival cruises, is all that lobbying money.
Right, right, right.
Yeah.
And so um I don't know why that says that. I did not delete. That's really weird to me. And it's like distracted me when I saw that. So, um, I talked about this is actually a really effective tactic for them to do, right? They pull these numbers up from opensecrets.com, and Open Secrets pulls them from straight from the FARA website. There's actually a full website. It's very easy to navigate if you ever want to go look and see what these things are, right? But there's this little tiny disclaimer at the bottom that Open Secrets includes in the it says, in addition to attempts to influence policy and public opinion, FAIR requires registration for activities including tourism and trade promotion on behalf of a foreign principal. And so that's actually a really, really important little detail that everybody obviously conveniently leaves off. And so when I first started digging on these numbers, this was, I don't know, probably like a year ago, when I first realized, I was like, what is this? Like, where's all this money going, right? This is a lot of money. I was interested, or I was curious to find out. I was like, what do you mean, spend on tourism? So anyways, you go to the FAIR website, and what you find, right? Because you can pull up a country, and you can see exactly the contracts that they sign with, whether it be a lobbyist or somebody representing them for tourism or anything like that. And you can see their numbers exactly. Interestingly enough, they actually used to have full reports to the to Congress that they would do biannually, and for whatever reason, they have just kind of stopped doing them. I guess it was like 2021. I actually couldn't find any legislation explaining as to why that those things have stopped, but they have. And so what I did in the thread was I pulled up, all right, China was the top one in 2024. They said they spent $84 million. Because remember that the numbers we just read off was 5 years total compilation of numbers.
Mhm.
But so here we look at, all right, then we take a closer look, and you find out that 64 million of the 84 million was actually just allocated to 3 media companies. So there are some Chinese media companies, right? Like that they broadcast, like Chinese soap operas, Chinese news, things like that. To obviously Chinese nationals living in the US. And
Mhm.
so $64 million of the 84 million, quote unquote, spent on foreign lobbying, or as presented by the Insurrection Barbie and all the other dishonest hacks out there. That's 64 million of that 84 million is actually just spent on these television stations, like their operations, their finances, what they pay their creators, what they pay their producers, all of this stuff. All of that gets reported, right? So this isn't going to Congress. This isn't lining the pockets of our politicians. This is
Yeah.
actually totally separate, right? Then you get down, tourism is another big one. Let's look at the Bahamas. So that in 2020, the Bahamas spent a little over $33 million. And so, but then you go over and you find out, well, almost all of that was from the Ministry of Tourism. For the first 6-month period, they spent 19 million, and the second 6 months period, they spent 12.5 million. So again, those are the commercials that you see. Anytime that a foreign country wants to talk directly to the American people,
Mhm.
they have to register with FARA. They have to register exactly what they're going to be saying to us, exactly the message that they want to send to us. Oh, look at there. Exactly what they're going to send, who they're paying to do it, how much they paid them, and I was going to say, that's it. Yeah, the message, how much, or who they're paying, and how much they're paying for it, right? And you can
Mhm.
find all of the exact. There's like total breakdowns, but I didn't want to drown people in all of the data. So yeah, so that's for the most part, that's almost all of those things, all of those numbers that you see. It has to do usually with tourism. That's the really big one, number one.
Mhm.
And then, or it's some form of communication with like nationals living in the U.S. or some kind of support for them. There's newspapers, Chinese newspapers, Japanese newspapers that are produced that have information and messaging straight from the government of whatever country it is. And so, yeah, those people have to register in the U.S. Or they have to register with FARA to let us know, which I think is a good thing.
Mhm.
But again, it makes it so that the numbers become very easily manipulated. Bad
Mhm.
actors can grab these numbers and say, "Look, China is spending all of this money to lobby." And again, like we see, that's total bullshit. They're actually not lobbying at all. Not saying they don't lobby. They spend probably $5 or $6 million on lobbying, but that's a
Five or six
significant.
million, yeah, $5 or $6 million
It's less.
in an election. That's like a drop in the bucket compared to, and it's not like just Israel's the only one. I mean, obviously there's big corporations. Oh, okay. I'm sorry.
Oh no, friend. No, Israel is the only one. Because let me explain to you what this is.
Okay.
Lobbying, most people don't actually know what lobbying is.
Okay, I'm
Okay.
glad you're setting the record straight then. Please.
Okay. Number one, rules of campaign finance is that foreign governments, foreign nationals, persons who are not United States citizens cannot donate directly to they cannot spend money in our elections. They cannot donate to our candidates. They cannot spend money in super PACs, nothing. They are not allowed to participate in our elections, period. Okay. Um, and so, uh, persons acting on behalf of a foreign country, right? So typically, that's what you have to do. That's what you have to register under FARA, right? I'm an American citizen. Let's say somebody from Albania comes, the Albanian government comes to me and they said, "Melissa, we really like your content, and we would like you to convince your followers to come visit Albania," right? We want you to tell them specific things about Albania, right?
Mhm.
Um, I have to register, right, under FARA, and I have to say, "Hey, I'm going to tell my followers all about this thing. This is what the government of Albania wants me to tell them. I'm going to tell them to go visit yada yada yada," or some kind of political message, something like that.
Mhm.
Israel is different because they have got this special little workaround built into the system. It's not just like a specific law, it's literally just built into the system, in that what's good for them is good for us. So if you're communicating a message that's, to the benefit of the state of Israel, well, it's still actually good for America as well. And so, no, we just don't have to register because, again, these are American citizens, right? And they can, they have free speech. They can talk. Now, if it was an Israeli citizen who didn't have any citizenship in the U.S., then they have to register under FARA and yada yada yada. But as long as we've got American citizens, because we have this special relationship where our foreign policy and Israel's foreign policy is just so interlinked, so perfectly in line with each other, that we actually don't need to register, and they're the only ones that get to do that. Nobody else gets to do that. But lobbying is very different, right? Because lobbying is um, speaking lobbying in what the way people think of, right, is when a citizen uh, talks directly to a member of Congress or an elected official, right? So they communicate some kind of message from a foreign country to our elected officials. They are like an intermediate, they're the middleman, right?
Mhm.
And so in the thread, I go on to explain that you go down a little bit, and what you will find is that hold on, let's see, we're da, 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 da. So once you get to these hold on, once you get
You're right.
to All right, so now, all right, we've got Qatar, right? And I think they spent like $6 million or something like that
Yeah,
on
I looked it
lobbying,
up. It
right?
was like last year yeah, it was like about $6 million. I think there was a little bit of money spent on something else. I don't remember exactly what it was, but it was a
Right.
drop in the bucket.
Right. So there are other things too, like Liberia is like always a big one because they have like they have merchants, not merchants, but they have a ship registry.
Mhm.
And I don't actually understand exactly how that all works, but basically their ship registry is here in the US. But all these companies, I don't say it's money laundering. I don't want to accuse anybody of money laundering, but it's like a business registry. So, all these offshore bank accounts, all these kind of shell companies that get registered in like the Bahamas,
Yeah.
Liberia. Another one is the Marshall Islands, right? And then those companies actually report all of their income, and all of that gets like reported under FARA. It's
Mhm.
very weird. I don't understand. It's been a little while since I wrote this thread. I thought I had a pretty good understanding of it. But again, that's totally separate. And I'm sure actually there's some probably really good stories there, but it's
Mhm.
totally not what I was interested in and looking into. So
Yeah.
but there is good stuff on the FARA website because you can actually see the actual communications that happen directly between these lobbyists and our politicians, right? And so I pulled up, let's look at Qatar, right? Because Qatar, we know they spent about 6 million of that, whatever, I don't know, $50 million that they spent was actually spent on lobbying. So when you have a country like Qatar that kind of has a little bit of a bad reputation, quote unquote, they get to charge, or lobbyists get to charge them like a shit ton of money to represent them,
Mhm.
right? Because it's like, well, again, and you see like Pam Bondi, she's carrying around that stain of having been a Qatari lobbyist
Mhm.
for years now. So, I mean, I don't know. Maybe some of it's probably worth it. I mean, she's never gonna not people use that against her. They weaponize it against her all the time, even though she like kind of barely did anything. From what I saw, all the records. I mean, there was a little bit of stuff, but not that much. And she only worked for them for like 6 months. But um, regardless, this is an example of a communication that happened between a lobbyist who was hired by the by Doha, by the ambassador, the Qatari ambassador, who this was right after, uh, well, not right after, but 3 months after October 7th. And so here it says this was written to. Let me make sure this is the one I was thinking of. Um, uh, okay, yes. So this is written to a congresswoman. She actually, I believe, she lost her reelection. Out in California, and this lobbyist is writing it to her chief of staff, and it says, "Dear Ari, I hope this email finds you well. My name is Josh Finestone. I am unsure we have met, but by way of introduction, I grew up in Huntington Beach and spent time in the Hill working for GOP members of the House and Senate. I hope you are well. I wanted to share some clarifying information on behalf of my client, the Embassy of Qatar. Recently, a concern has been raised that Qatar is sending money to U.S. universities. This is incorrect. The nation of Qatar spends hundreds of millions of dollars to bring Western education to the Middle East. In fact, the ambassador of Qatar wrote to every member of the Education and Labor Committee to correct the record. I want to reshare that letter below. If you would please take a look and confer with committee staff, I would appreciate it. If you would like to meet, or if you or the member would like to travel to Doha to see the education city yourself, I would be happy to connect you with the embassy. Thank you for your attention to this matter." And so again, this guy's brought on retainer. He's probably paid anywhere from $15,000 to $50,000 a month, and this is his job. You got a member of Congress goes on the floor, says, "Oh, the Qataris are, they're corrupting our youth, and they're making everybody on the college campuses anti-Semitic, and blah 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 blah." And then the lobbyist, the Qatar has to go hire a lobbyist to communicate a message, say, "Hey, stop lying. This is what's going on," and they have to send that email, right? And in these lobbyists, they get paid like anywhere from, like I said, retainers go $10,000 to $100,000 a
Ooh.
month. Yeah. And
Wow.
it's basically to like send emails and work the connections that they made while they were working on the Hill. So, you know, that's lobbying. It's so asinine. It's so great. I mean, it's a great job. It's a great gig. There was one, and they hired. There's so many lobbyists, right? Because you have to hire so many of them because each one only knows so many people. And
Right.
you have to, like, you're trying to, like, oh, I need people who know this senator, or people who know, the members of this committee and this, so that I can have direct communication with because again, the embassy is not allowed to. I'm sure the embassy would love to just be able to send the email out themselves, but they're not allowed to. Um,
Right.
and so, yeah, again, and I'm sure that the Qataris would love to actually not have to spend $100,000 on a lobbyist in order to get these emails sent. I have no doubt about that. But this is the way the system is set up, and of course, because it benefits Washington, and because it benefits members of the staffs of the staff. It's just a revolving door. You staff members leaves, they go to work for this big lobbying firm, they work all their connections, maybe they'll come back in a couple years, they'll get another gig on the Hill, make more connections, leave. Interestingly enough, you'll see in some of the contracts that you'll have a lobbying firm that, okay, we're spending, we're saving, or we're going to put you on retainer for $50,000 a month, but we also have these two former congressmen on staff. And if you want access to them, it's another $50 or $60 or $75,000 a month in retainer fees, And yeah, I saw that several times. It just kind of, at a certain point you just start to laugh because it's just so asinine.
Yeah, it sounds like there's almost like networks of people. Like, well, I guess there are some like lobbying groups. Is that kind of what you're referring to when people talk about that? Because you have to, like you said, there's only so many connections that everybody has. So eventually, you kind of need to have other people that have other connections to lobby on behalf of whatever you're lobbying for.
Right. Yeah. It's very weird. A lot of it does really honestly feel like money laundering. I'm not going to lie. I was looking through one from, like, I don't know, this is like back in 2021, where I saw this chick. She was paid. And of course, these lobbyists, these registered lobbyists, they have to submit all of their communications that they do on behalf of these foreign entities, right? They have to submit them to the registry, and then those things end up getting actually published. And you can go through, and anybody can read them. You can go to the Pharaoh website and scroll and peruse for yourself. And I saw one. This chick was put on retainer for $15,000 a month to to send out state dinner invitations to the Qatar. The Qatari embassy was hosting I guess they once a year they have this really fancy state dinner. Janine actually said she got to go to it one time, which is really cool. But and then of course they mail out the invitations, and then they have to coordinate with all the invitees, the members of Congress and their staffs and whatnot. So this chick was paid like $15,000 for 1 month. She was only hired for 1 month, and it was just to send out email invites.
That sounds like a pretty damn good job to me.
I was like, man, that is some, it's a damn good job. It's good work if you can get it, But so whenever you hear people talk about this, the Qatari money and whatnot, I'm just going to stop sharing that.
Yeah, that's right.
Whenever you hear people talk about that, you need to understand that they're trying to manipulate you in some way, shape, or form, right? They're trying to either distract from the influence that Israel has, because Israel's influence is so unique. No other country on the planet has anything like it. Even like there's no lobby in the US that has anything like, even American lobbies, no one has anything like it. So that's number one. Or they just don't know what the hell they're talking about, which is actually probably like 80% of people.
So what would be the difference between is this specifically like just for APAC? Because there's obviously other Zionist lobbies as well. Like, what would be the difference? Let's say like Citibank, right? Because everybody always says, okay, well, Joe Biden and Barack Obama was basically Citibank running the White House because they probably had a whole lobbying group behind them. Is there a difference between the way that, like, once again, APAC would lobby somebody versus the way like Citibank would, or is it kind of the same because of the relationship that the US has with Israel?
So when people say like the bankers or whatnot,
Mhm.
number one, they're always pretty much talking about the individuals, like your Jamie
Okay,
Dimons and your Larry
sure.
Finks, right? And obviously those are the famous ones, and I don't know the names behind all of the ones, like the Goldman Sachs, the Golden, the
Sure.
Goldies and whatnot. But it's a small clique, probably like 200 people, right? And these are your big dollar donors. These are the guys who fund all of your super PACs. Um, and which again we know from Citizens United is what really opened the door for super PACs. But this is actually the thread that, and it's good that you asked that, because this is the thread that I'm getting into, that I'm writing right now,
Mhm.
and it's about a case that no one actually knows of. Nobody's ever heard of it, but in my opinion, it is a much more consequential threat. Supreme Court case than Citizens United. It's way more important, like way more.
Okay.
And it is a case called McCutcheon. Let me say the name. Yeah, McCutcheon. It's kind of hard to pronounce. McCutcheon VFEC, right? And it's a case from 2014. And what it did was it had the Supreme Court. There used to be limits that people could put, or that how much people could donate to federal campaigns, right? And at the time that McCutcheon was decided, the limits were $46,200 that an individual, I, could donate total to all the campaigns, federal. Okay.
Okay.
And then I could only donate $70,800 to national parties, for a total of $117,000 that I personally could donate to federal elections, right? Now, with Citizens United, I could donate to all of these super PACs. But what most people don't understand is that super PACs actually they're not allowed to directly coordinate with the candidate, number one. And number two, they are specifically for independent expenditures. Citizens United was very important for swing elections. So it was very important for your presidential elections. And
Mhm.
then there's about 100 seats in Congress that it really matters. Everything else, they're not swing districts, they're not swing states. The only real elections that they have are in the primaries. Everything else is pretty much decided, right? So for the big dollar donors, yeah, okay, now Citizens United is great because we have our Mary Adelsons, we have our Ken Griffiths, we have Larry Finks that can spend all of this money on commercials and whatnot. But how do we buy the politicians that don't need us to run $100 million of commercials for them, right? Especially when we're limited to donating to directly to their campaigns. $46,200 was the max, right? And
Mhm.
of course, you can't donate. The actual max right now is, I believe it's $7,000. I think it's $3,500 for the primary, $3,500 for the general. But you can get around that with a joint fundraising committee and a leadership pack, which I can explain those. Or
Okay.
if you,
Yeah, let's kind
yeah,
of put it before you keep going on, because I want to make sure everybody understands this, because I'm following with you for the most part, and it's
yeah,
not because um you're laying this out
it's a
beautifully,
lot.
but
It's a
yeah,
lot.
no, no,
I know.
it's my fault. It's my
No,
fault.
it's
I can't
not your
understand
fault.
this.
It's a lot.
Well, okay, so basically what you're laying out here, you said the total amount you could donate to a single person is, or to
To a candidate.
all,
Hold on,
or
take that back. Okay, so
okay,
there's a
yeah,
all right. You have your principal campaign, right?
okay, yeah,
Melissa Whitty, I'm going to run for Senate.
sure.
When I start out, I have my campaign, my principal campaign fund, right? This is what you think of when you think of donating to my campaign. This is what you're
Mm,
thinking of, right?
yeah.
You, Kyle, are allowed to give me $3,500 for my primary race, like when I'm running in my primary.
Mhm.
And then you're allowed to give me another $3,500 for my general race, which is when I'm going to run against a Democrat.
Okay.
So a total of $7,000. That number gets adjusted with inflation every cycle. So it goes up a little bit, but it's not very much, right? Um, and all right, so you're tracking that, right?
Mhm.
But here's the thing. I also, let's say that well, I'm not even gonna say that. Uh, Now that's actually not that much money that you're allowed to donate directly to each candidate, right?
Right.
If we've got Joe Smith over here and he's a billionaire, he doesn't. I mean, $7,000 is just not that much, right?
Mm.
So in the early 2000s, the members of Congress came up with a little workaround, right? They came up with this idea that they had all these big dollar donors, and it was just getting to be a lot for them to, they were getting like carpal tunnel from writing so many checks, right? So why not let me, Melissa, partner with, say, the Republican Senate committee, right?
Mhm.
And I'll collect money for everybody in the Republican Senate, right? I'll collect $7,000 for me and for that person and that person and that person, right?
Mhm.
And then I'll just let, Joe Smith write me one big fat check. We'll put it into my joint fundraising committee, right? And then I'll disperse it for everybody.
Mhm.
Okay. Um, which again, why wouldn't Joe Smith just write the big fat check to the National Republican Senate Committee? Well, prior to McCutcheon, it's because he was actually limited to a $70,000 donation, right?
And that's
But you'll see
$70,000 like to everybody that he can spend on any election, right?
total. So that's
Okay.
$70,000 period that he's allowed to spend
Okay.
total. And so they came up with this idea of these joint fundraising committees, right? They were going to collect them for everybody, right?
Mhm.
Except still prior to 2014, people are still limited, right? You're not allowed to still. So let me show you the juxtaposition. So what happened with the McCutcheon case was that some like good old boy from Louisiana or Alabama or something like that. He was like he owned
Mhm.
like a trucking company. He said, it's not fair. You're limiting me. I've got all these people I want to donate money to. And he sued. He sued because they said it was a violation of his free speech, right? Basically, kind of connecting the principles of Citizens United, and said, I should be able to give the max amount to everybody, not just to.
Okay.
Does that make
So
sense?
basically, like, let's say if you and I were both running, then instead of him just saying, okay, well, I'm going to split my total 70K with,
Hmm.
us two, I want to give 70K to, to Melissa and I want to
Right.
give 70K to Kyle. He would be able to do
Right.
that. But previously he could only do 35,000 if you wanted to split it in half. Correct.
Right. Well, he can't.
Okay.
Technically, he's not allowed to give us. He's only allowed to give us the 7,000. But he wants to give, seven
We could give the
thousand
Republican
to
committee that
right.
we're
He
partnered
wants
with.
to.
Okay. Yeah.
Right. He wants to give it to everybody. He doesn't want to just be limited, right?
Right.
And he wants to be able to give to not just so we've got this joint fundraising committee, but then we've also got this thing called a leadership pack, which is separate.
Mhm.
And leadership packs are where Joe Smith can now give me $5,000 extra on top of that 7,000, right? And I've got the same committee underneath me. I've attached it to my leadership pack, so now he can give me $5,000 for all those people too. Okay,
Mhm.
so and he wanted to be able to give to he wanted to give to your leadership pack. He wanted to give my leadership pack. He wanted to give to, Becky's and Bobby's and everybody's leadership pack,
Mhm.
right? And he couldn't, so he sued, and that's what happened. In McCutcheon, the Supreme Court said, yeah, these limits total are unconstitutional, and
Mm.
they struck them down. So that is actually what opened up the floodgates for buying off these members of Congress in these really safe districts. And I'm going to show you what happened.
Okay,
Let's
so this is
see.
kinda like how Jamal Bowman and all them got thrown out of Congress because, I remember it was like Israel had poured millions of dollars into their primary opponents. And you're saying this ruling was dated for
It was
2014?
2014 it came down.
Okay,
Okay,
so
so I'm going to show you. Hold on.
yeah,
Let's see.
if you
Okay,
could
here we
pull it
go.
up, we'll pull it up.
Oh, look at me. I did a good job of. All right, so here is Steve Scalise. Steve Scalise is the majority majority leader in the House. Can you see that? So this is his, you can see, joint fundraising committee from 2014. So this is the cycle. It's 2 years. All cycles are 2 years. He raised $230,000, right? Let's see. Now, let me show you.
And this is straight from his website?
No, this is from the FEC website.
Okay.
So this is, we had the ruling come down, and let me show you what Steve Scalise's receipts looked like for that, right? This is another important thing that you can see. Hopefully.
Okay. You want me to pull that one up now?
Yeah. Okay, so you can see that these are the names of the people. Something that's very important that I'll show you, you'll see this change dramatically, is that these people, we had a max of like $50,000. So, whoever this was, this Lev Dawson person, they like maxed out with him. They, after giving to him, actually, this must have come after the thing. That's pretty much like the max they could have given, right? Mm-hmm. And this is actually the first year that Steve Scalise had this joint fundraising committee. Others, you'll see. But very importantly, you'll see that all of these people are from the state of Louisiana. Okay.
Okay. And just so we're kind of following along here, any individual can give whatever they want to the leadership fund, right? But they can't give whatever they want to straight to Steve Scalise.
Well, so the limits now with the joint fundraising committee is that they can give, whatever $7,000 for every single person that's on that committee. So he is attached. He's got the Republican House committee, so it's like the NRCC, I think it is, the National Republican Congressional Committee. And I don't know how many members it has. However many Republicans are in Congress at this time. It's like 219, I think it is. So now he can collect $7,000 because all members of Congress, or all Republican members of Congress, are part of the NRCC. He can collect $7,000 for each one of them.
Oh, okay. All
right. So you guys do the math on that, but it's a lot, right? And there is like some weird cap on it, and I forget. I think it's actually gets set among the two. The parties come in. I don't actually know how it is. You'll see here in just a second. It's just a ton of money. But you saw that was like $40,000. And that was 2014. So now it takes a little while for these things to get going. But here we go. 2016. Boom. Pull that one up. Now you can see Steve. Come 2016, so this is the very next cycle, has collected
crap.
$7 million. Okay, this is after, you can see that. Whoa, right? Now let me show you what Steve's. It gets way better. Trust me, it's so funny.
It's so crazy because it seemed like, and I'm only 30 years old, but it feels like when I was younger, you didn't really hear about this as much. But
you didn't, because it didn't happen.
Right. But now it seems like every time we get into an election, now everybody's like, holy crap, look how much this person spent, everybody brings up Miriam Adelson and the Zionist lobbies gave Trump over $200 million. Elon Musk, $170 million.
Well, but they're giving but hold on. Now they're giving to super PACs that are actually, that are only spending them on, and I'll show you here in a second why I say that this is so much worse, because of the corruption, because of what happens. So now, if you can, is there a way to zoom in on that?
If you hit control and then hit the little round button on your mouse, you should zoom in. I don't think I can't zoom in on my end, but yeah, like I said, control, and then if you scroll in, you should be able to zoom in. If not, maybe hitting the.
Did that make it bigger for you guys? I don't know. No. Okay. I just did a sorry. I don't. It's like not an option for me. Hold on.
I don't know if I could. Out. No, that didn't do anything.
Whatever. Yeah. Anyways, sorry guys. It's so what happened was that now we saw, that was a $40,000. Now the biggest donation was $139,000. In this is 2016. Yeah, that number. Oh, 139,800, right? And then what you see also when you look is that all of a sudden now we've got people from New York, from Missouri, from Kentucky, from Florida. Now they're in the mix. They're donating as well, right? So then let's look.
Somebody in the comments said if you hit control and then plus, that might zoom in.
Oh, okay. Hold on. Let's see. Did that work?
No, it's not doing that on mine.
Yeah. It's only doing it on mine. Sorry, guys.
We tried.
I can. Yeah. I can actually make these. I always try to include everything so people can't say oh, you edited it or you didn't, but what I'll do actually is I will,
if you send me over links for stuff, I'll put it in the show notes.
Yeah. Okay. So now we're going 2018. Boom. Okay. Pull that one up. And if you can see, so we went from 20. Oh, nope. Sorry. This is Pelosi. Oh, take it out.
Okay.
Hers is different. Sorry. No, that was my bad.
That's okay.
Scalise. Because I always like to do a Republican and a Democrat so you can see.
Gotcha. Okay.
And so, okay, here we go. So there's 2018.
Yeah, Scalise. Okay, there we go. It's pulling up in another row. Scalise 2018. There you go. Wow.
Now we're at $11 million. Again, guys, this is just the Joint Fundraising Committee. This is not his. And just so you know, Steve Scalise, he's just such a greedy little pig. All right. He's so egregious with his. He not has just one Joint Fundraising Committee. He actually has two of these bad boys. Okay. And he has a leadership pack. Okay. Yeah. So that's a whole other. So I will. Hold on.
So real quick to just kind of put a nice bow on this, 2014, $230,000, which nowadays seems like pennies on the dollar. 2016, all the way up to 7 million, and then 2018, all the way up to 11.5 million. So that's just exponentially more money from what initially was. Just over the course of 4 years.
Oh, it's going to get way better. So here's our top. I just zoomed in on that. So now our top donation is $247,000. So in just 2 cycles, we have gone up $200,000. Okay. But it gets better.
Okay. And was this all for Steve Scalise?
This is just going to Steve Scalise. Okay.
Wow.
Yeah. And real quick, hold on. So here we go. Sorry.
No, you're fine. This is absolutely fascinating. I don't think people understand the gravity of this, and we hear about it, people talk about it, but I don't think anybody really drills it. Wow. Okay, take it away.
All right, 2020. Now we're up to $18 million. Okay. Now, hold on. Let's see. And I can pull out some of these. Let's go to 2022. It's so good.
Well, I don't know if you just heard my dog there, but just to let you know you're not alone.
Yeah. 2022, $22 million.
Holy crap. Okay, so let me so that's
and hold on. Oh, real quick, let me show you these. Let me actually pull up these receipts real quick. Because that was what was really wild when I was looking at I was paying attention to the receipts earlier. By the time we get there in 2022, only you've just got 2 people in the top 20 that are actually from the state of Louisiana. Right. This is how much outside money is coming. When I say outside money, I mean,
outside of their state,
outside of his district, his state. Right.
Yeah. I did a quick calculation on, so this $22 million that he received in 2022, if you divide that by the $230,000 that he received in 2014, it is literally 99.4 times less that he receives. So in a matter of 8 years,
Hmm.
people have increased the amount that they receive from a campaign financing, or not campaign financing, but basically money laundering, if you will, long way around lobbying,
Hmm.
essentially. We've increased the amount that you can give a candidate in roundabout ways over almost 100 times, which is just
Hmm.
insanity.
And
Wow.
it all happened because now these people, as you can see, instead of being limited, and having to really choose like who they could give it to, they only had $46,000. We had to make sure,
Yeah.
like make it count. Now they can spread it across the whole country. They can give all this, right?
Mhm.
Okay, so now you say, all right, but still, they're still limited with how much they can give, except, or because obviously you think to yourself, well, Steve's going to take this money and he's going to give it to the NRCC, and then they're going to dole it out, and so those people are still going to be capped, right? Because they
Mhm.
can't give any more money because they've already maxed it out. Except, let me pull this up with you.
Mhm.
2024. Sorry, I've got the FCC website pulled up
No, you're
right now.
fine.
So 2024. Let's share. Um, um, Steve Scalise raised $18 million. Went down a little bit.
Okay, there we go.
Okay, 18 million. And but so remember how I said, when they transfer that over to they dole it out. I can only give $7 million, but I can, or, I can only accept $7,000. But
Yeah.
my joint fundraising committee, right? They have all these operating expenditures, right? So I can actually spend as much money as I want to spend
Oh.
in this. And it doesn't count towards the money. Like, does that make sense? Like, it doesn't count towards the money. If my joint fundraising committee spends it, well, that actually
Yeah.
doesn't max out my the donations that you gave me, right? So if I gave you $50,000, or you gave me, Kyle, $50,000 because I'm running for the
Mhm.
Senate, and you gave it to my joint fundraising committee, right? Well, technically, you're still only allowed to give me $7,000, right? So you're now $43,000 over. But if my joint fundraising committee spends all that 43,000, that extra 43,000 on operating expenditures for the joint fundraising committee, well, now I haven't actually gone over at all. Does
Uh,
that make sense?
Basically, they could just say, "Yeah, well, it costs us all this money to run this, so you're actually good."
Okay, and now, friends,
Oh my
this is
god.
where, do you see where this money gets spent? Okay, these are our monthly bills for travel, facility rental, catering, food, beverage, office
Oh
supplies.
my.
Okay, your boy Steve and his joint fundraising committee they're running almost $500,000 a month bills, anywhere, $150,000 a month bills. And this is all we get. This is, they spent it on travel and catering and food. Okay.
Listen, I can eat a lot. I don't know if I could eat $150,000 worth of food in a month.
Well, if you're eating, wagyu or Kobe beef on your private jet, you actually probably can. It's actually
Okay.
probably very easy, and not your private jet, but the private jet that you rented to
Okay,
fly you around.
my wife and I did a Wagyu steak once when we were
Yeah.
down in Miami. Yeah, it was a $300 dinner, and it was fantastic. But man,
Yeah.
whew.
Oh yeah. So yeah, so now all of this money, right? So Steve Scalise is now living a very, very good lifestyle, right?
Mhm.
Because he has this company called Strategic Advanced Services, which is the company that is used by the very important people in the Republican House, the Republican committee in the House, specifically Mr. Johnson. Not everybody has access to Strategic Advanced Services, from what I've seen.
I
You
say
have to
someone like
be.
a Thomas Massey doesn't sound like he would get any of that.
No, no, I do not believe
Absolutely
Thomas
not.
Massey has ever had contact. Scott Deschalairs, I love you, Scott. I don't know him, but I do love him, and I've written an entire thread about how much I adore him.
Mhm.
Even though I probably disagree strongly with him on Israel, no doubt. But Scott Schlayers won my award because just so you know, he does not have a joint fundraising committee or a leadership pack, and he spent about $100,000 to win his reelection in 2022, which is less than fat ass Steve Scalise spent on a single month's worth of travel.
That is
Um,
just
it's
so
disgusting. It's
insane. Yeah.
disgusting. It is absolutely. I mean, it's sheer corruption. It's in your face, disgusting. You have to kind of take like a cynical, smartass attitude to it, because if you don't, you will just become really, really bitter.
How could you? I mean, how could you not? It's so crazy to me, and I know us in this more libertarian sphere always kind of beat this point to death. But like, why are we sending all this money overseas, right? And then you look at campaign financing, and I just like I became so radicalized about the immigration conversation because I do have a lot of more like hard right friends. But also it's like the idea that our own people in this country, people my age, are like, I don't know if we could afford to have kids because the economic situation isn't that good right now. But yet, people who take these campaign donations spend more than my yearly salary in a month as a, automotive technician that went to school for
right.
years and been working on cars for over a decade. My wife's an EMT who works 12-hour shifts while pregnant. And,
Mm-hmm.
we're like, we're about to have our daughter, and it's like, yeah, I mean, we'll be okay, but it's not like we're going to
Right.
be loaded. We got two
Right.
10-year-old cars. Mine's 15 years old. Hers is about 10 years old. So like,
Mm-hmm.
but then you see this. Well, we could send $12 billion to Israel just in the last couple months alone. Steve Scalise is,
Right.
just $150,000 just to drop in the bucket to somebody like that. Like, it is just mind-boggling the kind of money that goes into these people's pockets.
Right. Yeah. So with somebody like Steve Scalise, right? Because again, he has a very safe district. He's never going to get voted out. He
Mhm.
actually they have like a first past the post system. So I mean, he's like doesn't even really have a real primary at all. Like he does not need this money. Okay.
Mhm.
Right. At all. Like he just doesn't. Okay. And so, when these people are writing these $300,000 checks to him, they are buying access to him, because
Yeah.
it's not like they want him, oh, he's my favorite politician and I just really want to make sure that he wins his election. That's not what's happening here. I did another one on Jim Jordan. Jim
Mhm.
Jordan's very similar. Jim Jordan represents a district that has not elected a Democrat since like 1936. Okay,
Mhm. Wow.
Jim Jordan never has a primary. Or he'll have like somebody will file as a primary opponent, and they've got like $1,000, right?
Mhm.
He never has like a real primary opponent. I can't say, technically, yeah, somebody filed paperwork. Actually, I think the last time somebody filed paperwork, they never actually reported any money raised. I mean, this
Mhm.
is what we're talking
It's
about.
a
These are not
joke.
serious, right? It's a joke. These are not serious candidates in any way, shape, or form. And yet, Jim Jordan again is raising and spending $15 million. Okay, and we haven't even gotten into the ghost donor stuff. And actually, I won't even. I just wanted to focus on McCutcheon, because the point of that is that when you think about like the big the Elons and
Miriam Adelson.
the Mary Madelson, the Michael Bloombergs, and what you're thinking of Citizens United, and that's an important case. Don't get me wrong. And super PACs are very important, and they play a very important role, and especially in for the White House, for the executive branch, right? Because that actually is a swing election every year, right?
Yeah.
But locking down Congress and securing and corrupting Congress in such a way, because people always say, well, what does it matter if they're giving all this money, right?
Mhm.
People don't understand that they can spend that campaign finance money on anything that they can quote unquote say is related to their campaign, right?
Yeah.
So, and I promise you, there is nothing that they will not say is related to their campaign. Adam Kinzinger paid for the air hangar for his own private plane. He paid for that with his campaign finance, the storage for it. He
Wow.
reimbursed himself for the miles he flew on his private plane.
Mhm.
Okay. Uh, Everything. I've seen ski lifts written off. I've seen, Dan Crenshaw wrote off the makeup services for his wife for an event makeup services. I'm not kidding. I'm not kidding. Okay. There is nothing that they can't. So again, they are living these extravagant lifestyles
Mhm.
through these campaign donations, and McCutcheon opened up the floodgates so that now they can collect instead of just most of them are, they before it was like you would see like 20, 30. Again, we saw like $40,000. That's the biggest. And because obviously the billionaires, millionaires and billionaires couldn't, they were limited. They had to pick and choose. Now they can give it to, you'll see them, they'll pick 5 or 10 people, right? That they'll give
Mhm.
that to. And yeah, Nancy Pelosi, same thing. But let me show you something about Democrats versus Republicans. And this
Sure.
was actually when I became so really, really, really disgusted with Republicans. Just so, because they're number one, they're always begging you for money, always.
Mhm.
Like anybody who's ever donated a Republican knows exactly what I'm talking about. I mean, Democrats are bad, but Republicans are like 1,000 times worse. I feel like I don't know. Maybe it's
Mhm.
because I'm a Republican and I don't really get that many solicitations from Democrats.
You
But
say you kinda only look at what's close to shoot the alligator
yeah.
close to the boat, if you will.
Right. And also, I don't actually, Democrats don't run on like fiscal conservative, being
They're at
fiscally
least
conservative.
honest that they're not
Right,
saving
right,
their
right.
money.
Right. They never try to like, come off as like these. So let me show you something that when I saw this, but here's the thing though. Democrats, when they collect just as much money, actually they collect more typically. They are so much smarter about the way they use it, right?
Mm.
Um, Let me show you. So Nancy Pelosi, hold on, I'm gonna pull up 2 things real quick.
I wasn't an anarchist. I was an anarchist for a while, and then I started to change my mind. I'm feeling like an anarchist again because I'm like, these people are so dirty.
They're so
Oh my
unbelievably,
god. Yeah,
yeah.
I mean, I know, like I said, we all kind of talk about this stuff and we just, I think
Mm,
transiently understand it. But yeah, the way that you laid it out, and I hope everybody listening to this kind of just really takes
okay.
this in because I never understood it like I do now.
Oh,
So yeah.
so okay, so if you can see down here at the bottom, this is the full screenshot, but it says it'll show you total disbursements, right? So in 2022, Scalise, sorry, I'm like really close. Scalise collected $22 million, and he spent just in this one. Okay, Grant, remember I told you guys that he's got a couple of these bad boys. He spent $5 million on operating expenditures, right?
Mhm.
Now let's look at Nancy Pelosi for, I believe I have hers pulled up for the same 2022. Not that it necessarily matters. Could be, shoot, where's it at? Gosh darn it. Okay, here we go. Sorry. I have so
Yeah.
many. If you could see my screen, I've got like hundreds of
A
screenshots that I
gajillion
take.
tabs up, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. There we go. And okay, now Pelosi. So Pelosi in 2022 collected, she collected 36 million. But then you
Oh,
go down, she only on her operating expenditures spent 979,000, right? So Scalise is spending, 5 million, $6 million. And of course, a lot of that, most of that is, well, actually not most of that in hers, but a lot of it is uh, credit card processing stuff, right? But
okay.
what you see with the Democrats is that they're not blowing it on bullshit like travel. All right.
Yeah.
They are putting it into the DCC, the Democrat Congressional Committee's coffers, and they are getting it into these swing elections, right? They're making sure that the money is being spent to win freaking elections. They're not right, they do live a lavish lifestyle. Don't get me wrong. There are some that definitely live it up. It's not everyone. But at least as far as Nancy Pelosi is concerned, she sends that money where it needs to be, right? And this is why if you're
Mhm.
a Republican, if you're always wondering how the hell it is that they are able to pull off these really tight swing elections, a lot of it is because their leaders aren't spending the money on bullshit, right? Their
Wow.
leaders are actually spending it on, you know, polling and canvassing. Canvassing is a huge one. They're paying. They're not dependent upon volunteers. They pay the people to stand outside the polls to hand out their stuff to answer people's
Okay.
questions.
So then, basically, it sounds to me, and please correct me if I'm mistaken, that the Democrats are willing to pay people to go out there and basically advertise for them, right? Basically, like
Oh, one hundred
what
percent.
people would call ballot harvesting. Whereas, like, it seems like what you're saying is that Republicans aren't willing to do, they're not willing to patronize their people who are collecting votes for them, essentially.
Well, it's not just that. Like in my
Okay.
state, like ballot harvesting is illegal, right?
Mhm.
But you've got the people that stand out in front of the voting sites, like
Yeah.
handing out the flyers, handing out the tickets, handing out the information on candidates, right? You think that that stuff doesn't matter, but it actually does, right?
Yeah.
I know because I volunteered for candidates. I have sat outside of polling places, and believe it or not, a lot of people, I would say maybe 10 to 15% of people come to voting places and they're they're open to be convinced, right?
Mhm.
And if you have a representative out there with information handing it out, it helps, right? It's little, but it helps.
Yeah.
So, Democrats, they pay people all the time. If you go, at least definitely in my county, but it's actually it's everywhere. Those people are getting paid about $20 an hour to stand out there, right?
Whoa.
It's yeah, it's I mean it's not bad money.
Wow.
Republicans, you got to it's all free. It's all on. If a Republican is out there, they are out there volunteering their time, right? And a lot of Republicans you talk to, they think that's noble and yada. And it's like, yeah, but the problem is
You're
that
not going to work as
you,
hard as somebody that's getting paid.
it's not even that. It's that like one time I was like a precinct chair and I was responsible for my precinct, and it was like I couldn't get people. Like people were like, yeah, I got an hour or two. I have 2 or 3 hours, But to ensure that someone is out there from the time the poll opens to the time the poll
You got to
closes
pay him.
is you have to pay them, and
Mhm.
actually you should pay them because
Right.
they're giving you it's and what I found that was really frustrating for me was that I felt like the Republican Party took advantage so much of their volunteers, right? At one point, 2020 election, I am not kidding you. In the 2 weeks of early voting, I was at that volunteering 100%. I was sitting out in front of my polling place for it was like 12 out of the 14 days all day long. Okay.
Wow.
Because of course I was, I really thought it was really important. I think Biden is awful. I think he did it all, what happened with the mandates, everything. I don't regret that at any time, but just when I started digging in and I saw like what they did with the money, the
Mhm.
bullshit they spent it on. And I'm like, and I'm sitting out here freaking rain and shine for 2 weeks, and you guys
For
don't even
free.
buy me lunch.
Yeah.
You don't even like give me a freaking lunch. Um, it was really frustrating. And then to know that all of my Democrat counterparts are getting paid $20 an hour in cash every day.
Ooh. Oh, so wait, is now when you say cash, like, is it
Well, I mean, they have like a receipt. I mean, I'm sure they had to pay taxes on it,
okay?
but their
Gotcha, gotcha,
their
gotcha.
person is showing up every day. Yeah, yeah.
That is
I mean, they are
so
in fact, yeah.
that's so crazy because a lot of the people in the more dissident right will bring up the point of like friend enemy and kind of like rewarding your friends and punishing your enemies. But I mean, this is a perfect example of like the Democrats know how to play the game where
Oh
like
yeah,
they
there's so much.
they
And
understand in order to win, you pay your friends. And
well,
like the
it's not
Republicans
just
here,
that.
yeah. Good.
It's that you have a network
Yeah.
that works like it's supposed to, as
Mhm.
opposed to this hodgepodge bullshit of volunteers. Well, we can fill this, a couple hours here and a couple hours
Yeah.
there, and yeah. No, you actually have a system. It's a freaking machine. When they talk
Mhm.
about the Democrat machine, This is what they're talking about. They
Yeah.
have got all of the ducks in a row, right? They are paying people. They're paying people to go door to door to give out information. They're paying them to harvest ballots. They're paying them to sit outside of the polling station. What are our people doing? They're flying around on freaking private jets, running up $400,000 a month travel bills. Okay. Yeah. So again, this is what we're talking about, and that's why the Republicans. When I say like it's so corrupt, it's so asinine. This is what I'm talking about, and um, you know, you can focus on Democrats all day long if you're a Republican. And again, I'm really hard on Republicans, obviously, but I
Yeah.
assure you, Democrats, you might be watching this thinking like, oh, well, people. No, they're not. They suck. I promise you, they suck just
Yeah.
as bad,
But they
and they're
take care of their
corrupt.
own in this
Well,
respect.
yeah, yeah. At the end of the day, like AOC's, I mean, she does pay her people well. At the
Mhm.
end, she's spending again. She's one that's spending $20 million on a reelection campaign that she doesn't need to spend. She literally does not need that money. Like, does not need
Mhm.
it. She does not need to spend that money. But she's not running up $500,000 a month travel bills. She actually has like a staff of like 100 people, which she
Yeah.
again doesn't need. But at least she's paying. I don't know. I think that's better,
Yeah.
slightly. But again, it's in its own weird way. It's got its own corruption, and that's actually a totally different topic, which I'm always happy to talk about. But and how she gets that money, and probably where it's coming from and where it's going and whatnot. They all suck. All right, I'm not an AFC fan, trust me, but
Mhm.
um, like by any means, I genuinely do not like her. But yeah, that's the Republicans though. It's so
It's just like
really,
when you kind of think about the Republican Party, and I know this is kind of like boomer cringe almost, right? Where it's like the party of family values,
yeah,
conservatism, and all this. But then, like, you look at the way that they're operating, not only their personal lives, their
yeah,
campaign financing, the way that they treat the people that are trying to get them elected. It's like, where's all your principle? Like, where is what you're supposed to stand for? And like, I get it, it costs
yeah,
money, but like, if you're spending
yeah,
$150,000 a month on food and bullshit, the least you could do is
yeah.
at least pay the
Let,
motherfuckers trying to get you reelected. Like,
let me
you don't get to do that without these
right.
people.
Let me show you guys another thing that you can do.
Okay.
So hopefully people are not.
No, I find this to be absolutely fascinating.
Okay, good. All right, good. So let me show you real quick just how this was actually my very first thing that like set me off, like literally just
Mm,
made me scream. And this was my first viral thread that I ever had.
mm.
And it's on Tim Scott. Okay. Tim Scott, Mr. Aw shucks, I just always think of Tim Scott. He like presents himself as just this like everyman, and he
Yeah,
pulled him
happy
up
go
himself up
lucky.
by his bullstrap. He's so let me show you what you guys can do at the for all of the shit that gets talked about the federal government, I will say that the federal government's websites are actually fantastic. Um,
You would hope for all
they're
the money they steal off of us, at least they could build a
yeah,
website.
they do, and they are very, very. Let's see. All right, can you guys see this?
Yeah, actually, you were able to zoom in there.
Okay,
So,
yeah. So this is Tim Scott. This is he ran for re-election in 2022, right? Tim
mhm.
Scott raised for his re-election $53 million. Now you see this little tab over here? You can actually go over and you can see how much Tim Scott's opponents raised. So
Huh.
Tim Scott raised $53 million. The woman who ended up running against him
Wow.
raised $135,000. Okay.
Not a chance. Wow.
Right. So when your opponent is only raising $135,000, why do you need $53 million? Why, when your opponent is only spending $94,000, why do you need to spend $36 million?
I would probably
Okay.
fly around on a private jet and
Oh,
whatever you
honey,
wanna
it's
do.
it's actually way worse than that. So let's see, go back here.
A tar and
Uh,
feathering would be the, moderate response.
So let me show you. This is my first viral thread with this one. So when I started looking into Tim Scott, I started like scrolling. This is what I do. I pull these up and I look at who they're spending this money with. This Targeted Victory is a well-known company. Just so everybody knows, it's actually ran by a bunch of damn Democrats, but that's a whole other, which is
Yeah.
just hilarious to me, right? But this Meeting Street Services LLC. So this one caught my eye, right? Because I started seeing how we've got a TV ad buy, we've got another TV ad buy, we've got TV ad buy, and then political advertising, and then we've got digital ads. We've got, and if you'll notice with like Targeted Victory, they'll have kind of similar, right? It's like one or two things that they'll say that they'll do, right? But what I noticed here when I downloaded it all is that this Market Street Services, they actually seemed to do a lot more than I kind of really expected, right? So I like to look into the companies and see who owns the company, right? And what I found when I looked at Market Street Services was that it didn't exist anywhere except in Tim Scott's filings. So I pull up here. I'll show you guys. You can pull up their. Let me find when I initially pulled up. Now he could have adjusted this, but I highly doubt it. By then, yeah, that's about right. I opened up the image for them.
Okay.
And I saw this right here. So what do? I immediately I put it into.
If there is this is something that was supposed to pop up, nothing popped up. I don't know if you could maybe shift it over to.
Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, yep. Oh, hold on. Yeah. Oh, hold on. Let me see. That's.
If you go over to yeah, I was gonna say if you go over to whatever pulled up, it should say share the screen instead.
Yeah. Okay. There we go.
There we go.
So I pull it up, and you can see their itemized stuff, and I get their address, right? And I look up their address. What is it? Well, it is this is an address. Again, this is a company that's getting paid millions, as you guys saw, millions and millions of dollars. And it's all of that is just a mailbox at a UPS store at a strip mall in North Charleston, right?
Oh, crap.
I go and I look up and I'm like, okay, well, that's weird. So I look up for a web page, no web page. Start digging. Eventually, what I found was that this company was registered one day before Tim Scott said that he paid them $1 million. It was registered in the state of Delaware. One day prior, of course it was Delaware. And it's just a shell company. We don't actually know who owns this company. We know nothing about this company. Like I said, this company does not exist anywhere except in Tim Scott's filings. Nobody else uses it. There's another company. It's called I think that one was Meeting Street Services, and then there's one that's called Market Street Services. It's a very similar name that actually is a real company. And it's in North Charleston, and Tim Scott's used it a bunch as well. But yeah, this one is like this shell company that doesn't exist outside of Tim Scott's FEC filings. And yeah, there is he ended up of that $36 million that he spent on his 2022 reelection campaign. At that time, I think it was like $12 million went to this company that nobody even knows if it even exists.
How does that's so crazy, because like you would think a red flag, someone somewhere would be like, hey, you can't just move this money around for your political campaign. But I'm sure there's probably the plausible deniability of like, oh, well, this isn't specifically for me as an individual, so you can't hit me with this filing. Like just
So one of the problems with the FEC is that it's like ran by a board and it's like split, right? So it's like 3 Republicans, 3 Democrats, and so nothing ever happens, right? You file complaints. It has to be like really, really flagrant and really, really egregious. Not saying obviously this is. So the New York
Yeah.
Times actually ran a piece on this story. They
Okay.
called him out. They asked him specifically, who owns this? It's so funny because he replied with a no comment to them. I ran my yeah, I ran my thread right after them, right? And it was very detailed, got a lot of traction, got like 1 million views or whatnot. And a local news story or a local news source, it's like Fit News out of South Carolina, really cool guys. They contacted Scott directly to ask him about the thread, and the Scott campaign said, we already gave our answer to the New York Times.
No comment.
Which was no comment. Yeah. And so
Holy
again, yeah, you have to file. And what you'll see with a lot of this stuff, something that I think is interesting is so yeah, you saw that it said like TV ad buys, right? Actually, I believe that actually has been adjusted. I'm going to go look back because I have downloaded all of these, and I do not believe that that's what that said back in 2023. They can do late adjustments to, maybe I don't know. It's weird, but one of the things that I think is weird is that there's nobody that tracks these commercials to see if they even ran. So you've got Tim Scott saying he spent $1 million on commercials. Number one, that he doesn't need to spend because his opponent only has $95,000 and she's clearly
Yeah.
not running any kind of ad campaigns. But I'm like, how do we know? How do we know that he ran that? How do we know he spent $5 million on commercials? There's nothing that tracks them.
It literally does, like you said earlier, just sound like money laundering to spend like that insane amount of money, especially when you don't have like a viable opponent to what you're doing.
Yep.
I just
Mm-hmm.
that stinks to high heaven.
Mm-hmm. It's bullshit. It's all bullshit. And Democrats do the same thing.
Yeah.
Chuck Schumer, I think he spent like $50 million on this last campaign. His opponent had like 900,000, right? It's like nothing. It doesn't have to spend it, but they do. And yeah, so I don't know where the money goes, but I have some theories. I have a lot of theories on it. I think that there are clever ways that you could launder it back. I don't know. We won't get into that, but yeah. So like this is like your intro to. So now you can see why I say I think McCutcheon is actually worse because. Yes, Citizens United is bad for swing elections, but the problem is most of our Congress don't live in swing elections, and so this is how they get bought. And you might think, well, who cares about, everybody thinks that if you give it to a campaign that, oh, well, what, they're just going to buy a bunch of TV ads, right? But that's actually not, as you can see what they're doing. Most of the time they're spending it on like somebody, Richard Hudson. No, sorry. What's his name? Jim Jordan in 2022. He didn't even employ a single person for his reelection campaign, and he spent like $12 million.
Woo. Yeah.
He had quote unquote consultants, right? Which is again, somebody can say I spent $50 million on consultants, and I spent $50 million on consultants, and it's like, okay, well, what did they consult with you for? You didn't actually have, you ran totally unopposed. What the hell could you have possibly been consulting anyone on? And, that's where we are. I can show you guys. I've got so many numbers that I do real quick. So getting back to Israel, because I'm always down to bash the Israel lobby, always. I don't know if you saw yesterday. It was 2 days ago that this happened. Was what's his name? Ben-Gvir, Itamar Ben-Gvir.
The finance minister.
Yes, the lunatic, the psychopath.
I mean, that's most of them over there, unfortunately.
Yeah. He was being hosted at at Mar-a-Lago, right? And he said, I'm going to read the quote because it was so just unbelievably shameful and egregious. Real quick. Sorry, guys. Let me. Oh, here we go. So he tweeted out, I'm reading directly from him. He said, I had the honor and privilege of meeting with senior Republican Party officials at Trump's Mar-a-Lago estate. They expressed support for my very clear position on how to act in Gaza and that the food and aid depots should be bombed in order to create military and political pressure to bring our hostages home safely.
It's always so funny because they literally had a deal that they were starting to get some hostages released, and it was by not continuing the slaughter when Steve Witkoff went over and had negotiated ceasefire. But then for some reason, they just can't stop slaughtering people over there.
Well, because they don't give a damn about those hostages.
Well, yeah, exactly. I mean, well, that's why they used the
Yeah.
Hannibal Directive on October 7th, is because
Right.
they don't care about the people. They want, they want to grab the land. They want Judea and Samaria, and they want to ethnically cleanse the Palestinians out of there. So, of course,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah, they don't give a shit about those hostages, as we all know. And but I was really, really disturbed by this. That number one, that this man was even being hosted at Mar-a-Lago, because he's actually a convicted terrorist in Israel. And he actually wasn't, I mean, you know what it takes to convict an Israeli of terrorism, a Jewish
Yeah.
Israeli at that, of terrorism. I mean, you have to be like a total shitbag, right?
Yeah.
So he's already convicted of that, I think, and he is genocidal. He routinely expresses just some of the most horrific rhetoric you've ever heard. But then just to know that he's already at Mar-a-Lago, but then who was there? Because when I saw this, I was like, what do you mean you were meeting with the Republican leadership? I want to know who the hell you were meeting with. And he was meeting with, of course, Tom Emmer, who is the Republican whip. If anybody knows, hopefully you guys know who Tom Emmer is. If you don't, consider yourself lucky, probably. And so I had, funny enough, just gotten through with Tom Ember's numbers the other day. Tom Emmer, of course, has a principal campaign. He has two separate joint fundraising committees. Actually, hold on. I take that back. Emmer has 3 joint fundraising committees, because of course he does. Why wouldn't he? Let me see if I can share this with you guys. That I don't know if I can share my numbers with you, like my numbers page. Let's see.
There should be a option for. Let me see. Let me make sure I got this right. If when you choose like what to share, it should say Chrome tab, window, or entire screen, and then figure out which one you want to do. Maybe go under window, and that
Okay.
should pull up what
There
you're
we
looking
go.
for.
Yay! Yay! Janine and I need to switch over here. All right. Can you guys see this?
There you go.
This is like way better than Riverstream. So here I've got Emmer's numbers pulled up. So what I do is I import everything from the FEC, right? And then what I do in numbers is that I create what are these called? I create groups, right? And so this one here, let me actually just delete it all. So I'll go over and I'll see disbursement description, right? And I'm like, well, what do we got here? So I add a category for that, right? And to see what he's spending money on. So he's spending $74,000 on transaction fees. Let me roll payroll, yada, yada, yada. And then, okay, so on this joint fundraising committee, he's spending travel expense like $13,000. And this is, well, I don't even know what that is for.
USPS.
Right. So, okay, so here we go. Meeting expenses, and you'll see here that that's like Capitol Hill Club, right? This is where they're, he's going out to get steak dinners and caribou coffee and whatnot. It's just a bunch of bullshit kind of thing. All of this. Now let's see what Emmer is spending money in here. Okay, now I've got it. Joint fundraising, transaction fees. Oh, consulting. This is the big one. So he's spending $841,000 on consulting.
Must be some good consulting. Jeez.
Well, but that's on fundraising consulting. Strategic consulting, he's spending $1.1 million on it in that one. Now we're over to our other joint fundraising, so this is number 2. Now he's spending on fundraising services $4 million. I don't even know, what it is that he's spending the money on. Then again, strategic consulting, $750,000 on that. E-marketing, compliance consulting, fundraising consulting. Here we've got print shop, all the crap you get in the mail, car rentals, airfare, caging and escrow. Caging is where they send out stuff to make sure the people still live there. Again, postage, I'm always very skeptical of this $600,000 on postage.
Jesus.
Yeah.
There's no way it's that much.
I'm like, you live in a freaking district of probably 600,000 people. I don't believe you when you say these things.
Yeah.
That you spent all that. Then again, we've got all of this stuff. So yeah, so you can see that this is Emmer's. Oh yeah, and this is his principal. And again, I believe that Tom Emmer's. I believe that his whatchamacallit, opponent raised like $100,000. And across all of those campaigns, it was, I think he raised a little over 20 million. Again, this is in 2 years that he's raising and spending that much money. And so obviously you don't need to spend it. So how are you raising it? And so you see those consulting firms, right? And you're like, well, you might say, well, I didn't see any like exaggerant travel stuff on there. Well, a lot of these consulting firms are just kind of like third parties that they pay for everything and then he reimburses them. I know that Trump spent something like he ended up getting caught giving Melania's hairdresser, paying her like $150,000 a year. And then he had billed that to the campaign under some kind of consulting. So
yeah, I remember hearing about the Democrats freaking out about some of the stuff that was on his campaign finance. It's like, there's no way he's the only one with his hands in the cookie jar in that respect.
Oh no,
you motherfuckers are guilty.
All of them, all of them. Oh yeah. The Democrats are. I mean, it's just as extravagant with them. I just feel like they're smarter about it.
Yeah, yeah.
They're just not so in your face.
Yeah, people used to always say that like the Republicans are. Like the good guys and the Democrats are just like misled, but no, it's more like the Republicans are dumb and the Democrats are like purposefully
like,
malevolent.
They're super evil, but they're really smart about it. It's just like, it's like Pinky in the Brain, man, all the time.
Yeah. All right. Well, Melissa,
I know it's been a while.
Yeah. If there's anything else you got, go ahead. If not, I think we'll wrap her there. This was absolutely fascinating.
Yeah, if you guys want, if you like this stuff, you can go to my I'm gonna have the McCutcheon thread up tomorrow. I'll have all the stuff, so you'll really be able to review all of those things. I'll have links in there. But if you're interested, I have a lot of threads on campaign finance under my highlights on X, and you can follow me, you can see those there. I do bitch a lot about Israel, I'm not gonna lie. I feel like that's the most important thing. So sometimes people are like, I wish you would post more campaign finance stuff. I'm like, I get it, but there's like a genocide being committed, and I feel like I should really talk about that a lot right now. So
yeah, I know exactly how that goes, because sometimes I'm like, am I talking about Israel too much? But it's just like, it's so in your face, and all the people in power are putting it in your face and telling you that they're doing that. It's like, all right, no, I'm just not accepting this anymore. So no, I completely get it. And then I'm a health focused guy, but when I write a health on, a thread on health, it'll get 10 likes, 89 views. But though I say something about Israel and it's, sometimes it goes viral, and it's like, all right, well, I see what you guys are paying attention to, and, clearly what people are kind of thirsting for. So have at it,
I agree. Yeah. A lot of this stuff is linked to Israel. So a lot of times I can pull it in, or my audience will be, interested and whatnot. I also just kind of, like to make. I have a lot of lefties that follow me, like a lot, and everyone thinks I'm a lefty. So
Mm,
it's funny. It's sometimes I'm like, I don't want to offend these people, but I also want to comment on some of this because I like them. I do like these people.
mm,
I like a lot of the lefties. I disagree with them vehemently on, but I don't think they're bad people by any means. And
right.
so I'm like, I don't want to be a jerk or anything like that. But sometimes I really want to comment on some of the crazy cultural stuff. But it's like, I still post it, but it'll get like, 50 likes, and that's it,
Yeah. Yeah, usually,
Yeah.
I've been called a liberal so many times, it's like, I'm the guy that goes out and says we should jail abortionists for
Yeah.
life. So, that's a very liberal position, you know?
Yeah, it's such a weird like position to be in, to be called a liberal. I'm like, do you, or like I'm a, like I'm
Mhm,
always called like white liberal woman, white Karen,
mm.
I'm like,
Do you know me?
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's so
Whatever.
nuts to me. But yeah, Melissa, this was absolutely fantastic. We'll definitely have to do another show sometime. I have some
Yes, excellent.
ideas in store, but yeah, no, I really enjoyed this.
Okay,
So
yep. Thank you so much for having me. Bye, guys.
awesome.